It's always good to hear the story of redemption. Today, Melissa's going to tell the story of how Christ redeemed and has moved in her life. Please, come up. Thank you.
Stop it, Rachel. Okay, so bear with me. This is a week earlier than the 5th Sunday that I was expecting to be speaking on. So, but I'm just hopeful that my story will be edifying and glorifying to the Lord. He not only hung on the cross for me, but he just hung in there with me. So, I wasn't a very easy person to bring into the kingdom, I think. Maybe some of you feel that way about yourselves. And but I'm really one of the most grateful because it was kind of unlikely. And I am really fascinated with the stories that people have been telling. Some of you have shared yours because it's so unnatural to be convinced somehow to give control of your life over to someone else. And that's really what coming to the Lord means. And I think those that understand that and come as adults into the kingdom have to really think about it and count the cost. So I thought an interesting way to start would be to say, well, what's the earliest memory that I have of just something spiritual happening? And probably being in church, looking at the stained glass windows and thinking, this is really different. Why do the women wear such funny hats, with things coming out of them? And my favorite point in the service was always when the minister would turn and his big robe would fill with air and he would just look like an angel going back down the aisle after the service. Maybe it was my favorite point because it was showed that the service was over, but and then I remember Jesus just being a really good friend as I was growing up. At a really young age, I would go out to play, especially in the summer, and I would ask Jesus to sit down by my favorite tree because I was going to run so fast and climb so many trees that, with his robes and stuff, he probably couldn't keep up, and he might get stuck in a tree, he might fall out of the tree, and so he was my friend, but I had to kind of protect him, which is pretty funny to think about. And I remember Sunday school and being taught about Adam and Eve and taking a bite of the apple, and I raised my hand and I said, no, wait a minute. You mean if they hadn't taken a bite of the fruit, in Genesis, in the account doesn't actually say apple, but if they would not have taken a bite, that we wouldn't have sin in the world? And she pretty much agreed. And I said, well, I never got a chance to reject the apple. I mean, I could have done better than that, right? And so I was maybe a little problematic with learning theology. I remember really being indignant about that, but I was a willing student, and I think I was really spiritually hungry. I remember in about the 3rd grade checking out every single book in the school library about spirits. The church that I went to didn't really have a clear teaching about spiritual things, or the kingdoms of light and dark. It was all kind of not very specific. So when I checked these books out, that wasn't a good thing. Somebody should have red flagged that, because I was learning about basically demonic stuff and how ghosts and poltergeists and all these things worked. But I didn't have the discernment to say, that's not really spiritual. But if you're just hearing it as a kid, you can cross that line pretty easily. So, take note, I was picking up spiritual baggage at a young age. The other thing that I remember is having my aunt and uncle were in the press corps for the embassy in Cairo. They used to send us cool stuff. They sent us one time a brass bowl that my aunt explained it was called a spirit bowl. People would put water in it and drink from it. It had hieroglyphics and carvings, engravings inside. So I thought, well, that is so cool. And I would climb up on the counter, grab this thing down, and fill it with water and drink it, glug, 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 as often as I could get away with it. And I thought, well, this is some kind of spiritual power. This is great. So, but one thing about picking up spiritual baggage is that when you want to put it down again, it's more like a parasite than a purse. And it's kind of infiltrated, and it's kind of in your system, and it's not easily discarded. But I didn't know that then. Rachel, could you get me some water? From the spiritual bowl. Yes. Smart Alec. Oh, there we go. Thank you. She's still looking for that bowl. So, at the end of, thank you, sweetie. Jeff brought me that. At the end of grade school, so during grade school, I had two best friends that didn't like each other. We'd been together since kindergarten, but one was really nice and just a good girl and studious, and the other was kind of going the other direction. So guess which one moved away at the end of 6th grade? Right. So I lost my really good girlfriend, and my other friend was the only friend I had going into, so junior high is what we called it back then. I think is it middle school now? 7th grade. And she ran with a rough crowd, and so I was drawn into that. When I could kind of see what was going on, I was pretty uncomfortable. They were getting into a lot of trouble. She was shoplifting when I was with her, and I can remember the first time, and she showed me what she'd taken, and I turned around to see somebody's gonna catch us, and I don't know, it was a time where I thought things weren't gonna turn out well. And I think one of my daughters put it very well. She said, Mom, one of my friends' mom's mom was really bad when she was young. So she's really strict with her daughter. So I'm guessing, from how strict you are with us, that you were probably medium bad. So these were my medium bad years. you have to stick by your friends, and if they're doing stuff, then you kind of tolerate that. But at 13, it's really hard to stay medium bad. You're kind of going the wrong direction. But praise the Lord, I survived. Never got arrested. Did get sent to the principal's office, but on various occasions. But when I went to high school, the schools joined with the parochial schools, and I found new friends. And I thought high school was way better. I was still going to church, and of course, with my family, my great-grandfather had actually co-founded this church, and so it was pretty embedded in our family. So when they asked me to represent our synod and our state, and went to a national convention representing the church, I was really happy. But spending time within that denomination, and especially on the national level with the leadership, I thought, something's wrong here. There was just a corruption and a hypocrisy that was very disheartening. And I learned at that point that that the Bible wasn't to be taken literally, even in the sense of morality. It was just kind of a goal that we would aim for, but of course we weren't going to actually be able to attain it. So that was not the example of my parents, and I know that there is a faithful remnant in so many churches that are what I would call apostate churches. I'm not saying that everyone is bad, but at that point, I was getting uncomfortable, and for example, I went to Sunday school as a high school student in the church and was being taught situational ethics. So I wrote my definition of situational ethics. Let's think of times when the right thing to do might actually be the wrong thing, but the wrong thing might not be the right thing, but it's actually the better thing because of the circumstances. So that was the beginning of realizing that that the lines were very blurry with morality, with ethics, and that the boundaries for things can change as you need them to change. I feel like now, looking back, it's a convenient ideology if you want to do anything. Anything you want to do, basically, you can make okay. I think that's a really deconstructive teaching for young people, because you've just been building this foundation into them, and all of a sudden, basically, you're being told, it doesn't really matter. So it was a discouraging time, and I just started to feel like something was really, really wrong. Some things in my life were going fine, but inside, and I think partly because the spiritual lines were also blurred, so there wasn't a kingdom of light and a kingdom of darkness. There were benign spirits that were moving and traveling, and that you could participate in. So I got it I would say I crossed from discouraged to depressed, and I was sitting at an intersection one day in my little car, and I thought, if I just pulled out in front of this big truck coming speedily along, I will have no more problems. Just brilliant, right? No more problems. So I did. I crept out into the lane of the oncoming truck, but I hadn't really thought about him, about the driver, trying to stop, or of him getting hurt, or of me just getting hurt and not just disappearing. I could only think that I'd have no more problems. But I saw his face, and now the truck was braking and fishtailing and coming sideways. And something sort of snapped, and I pulled out of this kind of trance-like state and just floored it, and he missed me, and he pulled over, and he gave me quite a piece of his mind, because I pulled over too, and he came to the car, and I rolled down the window quite sheepishly. And I couldn't lie and say, oh, I didn't see you, because I did. And but it shook me up to the point of, wow, I should maybe talk to somebody. So I actually drove straight to the church. I knew the pastors, I knew people there, and I explained what had happened. By then I was really upset, and I said, I didn't even think about my family. I didn't think about this guy. I didn't, think about what the ramifications would be. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, everybody has a death wish. He said, it was just part of yours. And he picked up his cigarette out of the ashtray, and he said, this is part of mine. And I thought, okay. Now, what about, girl, you need Jesus? It just was so unhelpful that my disaffection towards the church was really growing at that point. And I thought, okay, I just about became a statistic, and this is your answer? I think that's actually Freudian, that whole death wish thing. So you can see that the Bible wasn't really taught. It wasn't put forward as this is where you go for solutions in life. So, this is not Spirit Bowl water. And I have a few thoughts about that, looking back. If you're a thinking person, it's not hard to get to that place that is a good resolution. Secondly, if you're a feeling person, especially as a teen who's just getting used to, wow, it's a biochemical change. It's, there can be genetic factors, there can be neurological factors, so many things. There can be trauma, experiential factors that play into this. So if you're a thinking person, you can get there. If you're a feeling person, especially a teen, you can get there. To justifying this as, okay, this is actually removing pain from the world, right? If you have that much going on. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying this is a real pandemic, even more now with the teens. And I think we just need to understand that there are also spiritual factors besides all the other things. And I think, given my history, being very spiritually active but not discerning light and darkness, I think I got some help. When I replayed that tape in my head, I thought, what was I thinking? Well, I was thinking I heard all my problems will be over. But when I replayed it, it's all your problems will be over. So I feel like there was another voice, going on that was taking advantage of all the other factors. And yeah. So just if you know a teen, pray for them, because, and actually, this pandemic is now increasing mostly in men, not teens. It's mostly in older men. So pray for them too. So we got through that intersection. I probably shouldn't have gone to PLU. But that was kind of on my trajectory. And what I remember is studying Karl Marx. And I guess I was trying to fulfill requirements, prerequisites for other classes. I was actually a science major at the time. But Marx, Camus, Sartre, existentialism. I don't think my religion professor was a Christian. I think he was Buddhist. He went around with cards in his pocket of kanji characters that he was learning. They weren't Bible verses, right? So it was kind of a struggly time. If you read the existentialists, they're just not a barrel of laughs. I'll say that. They're depressing. And I think I already had an existentialist crisis. But I think I got out of there with a little scrap of faith. And it was really salvaged by working in Norway that summer. It was actually a friend from PLU. She said, let's go and work in Norway this summer. I said, great. So we wrote to 90 hotels, got responses from a few, picked out one, and it turned out to be just a few Norwegian miles from where my grandfather was born and grew up. So it was just a wonderful summer. I'd get off work at about 10. I would grab my backpack and my sleeping bag and go and sleep on a rocky shore on the fjord. And I had 2 books. I had a poetry anthology and some C.S. Lewis. And God just sort of knit my soul back together. Some of that early poetry of like Yeats and Auden, W.H. Auden, and Gerard Manley Hopkins, these are people of faith, and they're solid, and they're very accepting, almost embracing of how difficult life can be, and don't expect everything to be accommodating and comfortable and easy, and embracing that while not giving up on the Lord, being involved and still loving us through tragedy and difficulty, was really kept that thread of faith alive in me for that time. Even though I wasn't really getting any teaching, I wasn't reading my Bible. I don't know if I had a Bible, but it did keep the idea of, okay, difficult life, God is not absent. Which, if you read Nietzsche, which I had to, it's God is dead. But did you see the other side of the wall where God says Nietzsche is dead? You know, just kidding. So from Norway, I moved to Austria into a foreign studies program. And it was wonderful. And my thing really was to kind of, whatever religion was endemic, you know, the closest church is what I would go to. And so in Norway, it was the Stavkirke. They had a state church. I strangely had a couple of cousins, a couple of relatives who were young girls, my age at the time, and they were Christians, and their parents were not. I had never seen that before, never, because the state church in Norway at the time was Protestant, but it was very liberal. And they were real believers, and that really confused me. But so I moved to Austria. The closest church was Catholic. I laughed when Brad said he learned to genuflect, because I did too. And some churches were still men on one side, women on the other side. But the church was a beautiful Baroque cathedral, and I think I was just there for the aesthetics mostly. It was in Latin. But I think something was kept alive. And I even tried to join the Legion of Mary, which, has anybody heard of the Legion of Mary? But they found out I wasn't actually baptized Catholic, so they wouldn't let me join. But so after my time in Europe, I went back to the States, finished up with a degree in education, and joined the Peace Corps. I was assigned to Costa Rica and rented a house on stilts in the jungle. It was actually in a village that was an old United Fruit village. And so there were no walls on the first floor of the house. It was just my hammock, and upstairs was just a bare room. No electricity. We did have running water, which was great. My work was mostly in horticulture and in the school gardens program, which meant had to machete a plot of ground near a school and till it up and plant it with vegetables to augment the kids' lunch program. They had lunch at the school, and so that was really a lot of fun. And it was excellent preparation for life here on the island. But my spiritual life, I feel like, needed a machete too. It was overgrown and with crazy ideas. So I had quite a bit of time on my hands, and I was alone. And so I came up with the brilliant idea to make my own religion by taking ideas from everything that I knew of, and then I could make stuff up. It was going to be mine. So that was my project while I was there. I thought, well, I better start with what I know. So I had a huge concordance somebody had given me, And it was the closest thing I had to a Bible, and I thought, well, I know something about Christianity, so I'll start there, picking and choosing. So I looked at that book, and it had, a lot of scripture in it, and I realized I couldn't make any sense out of anything from scripture. And I would read it, and I'd think, come on, as literature, this is not hard. But it was so opaque to me. And I thought, and I remember this book smelled like mildew. So it had been in the jungle a long time, right? It just reeked, and it was a huge book. So I tried and tried. And then I just slapped it shut, and I thought, this religion is too arcane for me to even bother with. I just need something new. And I remember sinking back on my hammock and falling asleep. So the next day, I woke up, I got on my scooter, and was going to work. And there was a dog in the road. So I thought, okay, those dogs, they always get up and move. And by the time I thought, this dog isn't moving, and what it was in my mind is protect your relationship with your village, right? Protect it, because if you don't have credibility, if they have no affinity for you, your work will be for nothing. They won't continue it when you're gone. So I thought, okay, I can't hit this dog, it's somebody's dog. So I braked, and the bike slid out from under me. I hit some loose gravel, and I crashed and broke my leg. I just remember yelling because it was so painful. I actually took the top of my tibia off. The ligaments just pulled it off. So I was medevaced to the Capitol, and then to Walter Reed Hospital in DC. Any of you guys been there? Military hospital. The Peace Corps is just the military without guns. So I was medevaced to Walter Reed, and then put in a full-length cast, hip to toe, and sent home to Minnesota to recover at my parents'. So I hadn't been there very long. I was babysitting my nephew, who was just a little tyke, little toddler, and I smelled something funny, and I looked in the basement and realized the house was on fire. And I thought, oh my goodness, I gotta get that kid out of here. So I took him outside, and I went back, remember, no cell phones. I went back in to call the fire department. And it was actually in the old wiring, so it was traveling through the floor, to call the fire department, and he came back in. And I thought, there's a stairway right inside the door of the porch, and I thought, if he gets up the stairs, I'm in a full-length cast. Do you know how long it takes me to get up and down stairs? So I panicked, and I dropped the phone without giving them the address, and grabbed him and ran back outside. I thought, well, I can't lose him. What if he thinks we're playing hide and seek or something? I'm in this cast. So anyway, the house was totaled in that fire, but my dad and mom, of course, wouldn't move out of the house. They weren't home at the time, but so he just took the insurance money and tried to rebuild, to strengthen the things that remain. I thought, okay, Dad, I know that's biblical. It's fine. So, so the house is still standing. He did a pretty good job of rebuilding. So I helped with the renovation. I was there. I was still in a cast. We moved out for a while. So I was thinking, yeah, so how is that personalized religion going there for you? Within a month of deciding to do that, I had, basically burned a house down and gotten in an accident. I don't know. It's in retrospect, right? 2020 vision. So eventually, I was freed from my cast and allowed to rejoin the Peace Corps with a new job in the city as a photographer for the National Park System of Costa Rica. It doesn't get much better than that, really. It was a wonderful job. And during that time, I was invited to a Bible study. I thought, yeah, sure, I know something about that. But these people were so different, I almost couldn't relate it to any previous Christian experience. They were weird, and they were stuck in the first century. I thought, these people don't say prayers, they actually pray. There was nothing ritualistic about it. And they spoke in tongues, which I'd never heard. They were really nice, normal people. There was the head of the music department from the university in San Jose, Costa Rica, and head of the dance department, a couple of other musicians. But they were so fascinating that I just had to keep going to this Bible study. So eventually they asked me to give kind of a presentation of my spiritual journey. So I thought, okay, you're not going to like it, but I can do that. And I explained kind of where I was at and the things I was into. And you know how you can just tell that people are thinking really hard about what you said and not liking it? And that's kind of how I felt. So they asked me at the end of that who I thought Jesus was. And I said, well, I think he was who he said he was, but I don't see what that has to do with how I live my life. Yeah, disconnect. So that met with a lot of silence. But they didn't harass me or anything, but they always closed the meetings with prayer. And so when they started to pray, there was a message in tongues, which I thought, that's cool. I mean, this first century stuff is really interesting. I just felt like I found this little enclave of anthropological interest. It was so weird and different. And so I just kind of went along with it. But I realized that when this man was speaking or praying, I literally became so angry that I thought, I am going to pick him up and throw him through those glass doors. And I felt this like supernatural strength, like I really could do that. I mean, he was, 225. I couldn't have done that in my own strength, but I thought, I can do that. But I couldn't move. So that was a problem. And the other problem was, I didn't have any problem with him. Where was this anger coming from? And I just was baffled. And then I felt like a chute, like a vacuum, an industrial-sized vacuum was coming down over me and just pulling all this blackness out of me. And I thought, okay, this isn't even fun anymore. And when they stopped praying, that stopped. And I couldn't move anywhere. I couldn't move a muscle. And I mumbled something like, I don't know how you did that, but I want to get out of here. So obviously I had no spiritual discernment, and I didn't know how to categorize that experience. So I left, but I kept coming back to this Bible study. I just couldn't resist. I don't know what it was. Maybe I was just, there wasn't a lot other things going on. I don't know. But I kept coming back, and finally, after watching them, listening to them, I thought, I could try this. This is so different from what I experienced before. Maybe I could do this. And so when I thought, I want to be a follower of the Lord, but I couldn't. So I told them, I said, I want to believe, but I can't. And they said, well, we'll meet with you. So we got a lot of missionaries together, and they asked if I'd be willing to get prayed for. And I said, sure. So they prayed, and then they said, just say, Jesus is Lord. I said, okay, no problem. Jesus is, nothing came out. And they said, okay, we're going to pray again. And they prayed again, and I tried again. And different things would happen, like my tongue would thicken up, or my throat would close up. And I was really sure that this was not happening. I just had no explanation for it. And it went on and on and on. And one of them finally stood up and said, sometimes these are really tough cases, and we should probably just all go home, and we'll pray some more. And I said, no. I realized I was not in control of my life. And I said, no, just try one more time. And so they did, and I was able to say, Jesus is Lord, and I leapt up out of my chair. I was so happy. And everybody was just crying, and especially me. And it's kind of funny looking back, maybe because it went on so long, but nobody said, hey, do you want to receive the Lord now? And we just all went home, and I had to really think about it. And I have this thing of talking myself out of something actually happening. So I got home and I thought, I don't think that really happened. I knew it did, but I thought, I think this is a cult, and they have some sort of psychological power. And I thought, I need clarity. And in a lot of religions, you gain clarity by fasting. So I started a fast, just black tea, which, oh, thank goodness for water. Oh, I got such headaches. So day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And I did come to a conclusion that I would meet with them once more. I would go to one more prayer meeting, Bible study, and then take a break and assess things. So I was still fasting, so I thought, I can resist any manipulation. I don't know, there's just something about it that there's just a difference in perception. You're not easily swayed. So I was just sitting there at this meeting, and all of a sudden, I leapt up out of my chair, and I didn't know if I was going to leave and run out the door, but I went over, and I kind of tapped one of the missionaries. I said, and it was a house meeting, so we went into the kitchen. I said, I need to receive the Lord right now. And he said, okay. And he just prayed with me, simple prayer. We went back in there, and he said, after the meeting, he said, this is what happened, and I think we should pray for Melissa. And I thought, sure. So they started to pray for me, laid hands on me, and he sort of said, whatever language you want to praise the Lord, you can just quietly be praising the Lord while we're praying. So my working language was Spanish, so I started in that, and I still had some German in there from living in Austria, and then pretty soon I thought, wait, what was that word? I was just quietly speaking, and then what was that phrase? I don't even know that phrase. So, and then it was totally in a language I didn't recognize. So I thought, well, that's cool. And they kind of chuckled because they knew I was speaking in tongues. But it was just like a bubbling fountain just coming up and just refreshing me. And it was great. And it was very natural. I didn't feel like I was being coerced in any way. So after that, for one thing, I did get into the Word. I'm just sort of a book person, so that was easy. And I thought, okay, I've got this book, and what do I need to know? What's my biggest problem? And I thought, my life. So I looked up every single verse, and then you had to use a concordance, right? You couldn't just punch it in. That had the word life in it. Which I think is kind of funny, but it helped me so much to have, we're to be renewed by the transforming of our mind, and I needed a lot of transforming. I went through further deliverance. There was just a lot of things I had committed myself to. I had a lot of things to burn. I actually made huge fires and just burned a lot of things. And I mean, physically burned them. And burned bridges back to any relationships that were going to hinder my devotion to the Lord. So I, made such a dramatic change. And Rick and I were laughing because somebody came up to us and said, yeah, you must have been in church all your life, right? And I thought, well, kind of, but it's kind of not like that. So let's see. So I just want to close with this. You know how deemed can be used as in to give meaning or value to something? I deemed it necessary to blah, blah, blah. So I said, the devil deems us worthless. The Lord redeems us as priceless. Thank you.